This is the 20th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, AFTCO, Pro Guide Batteries, Spro, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning, and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing. It is April 3rd, which means exciting things are happening both on and off the water. Typically, April is where we kind of start to see where the seasons shake out on both the BPT and the Elite Series, who is going to make a run at things, who's struggling. Then on the water, you also have the fish that are moving up in a lot of the country. It's probably, in my opinion, the best month for just straight up bass fishing across the country. I know down south you can get, the Florida thing starts early. Up north, it really doesn't get going until May. But as a whole, I think we'll bring our guest just right off the hopper to ask him this. Jacob Wheeler, thanks for jumping on BTL.
Man, I appreciate you having me on.
Is that a fair assessment? If you were to pick one month that you say is bass fishing, what month is that for you?
Okay. It's April. I think in the Midwest, I actually just did like a top 8 of the month yesterday for the channel. Mm-hmm. And it's like, to me, like when I think of April, I think this is the opportunity to catch the biggest fish in the lake, because that is when they push shallow. The biggest bass in the lake push shallow, and it's like I think it is bass fishing. I mean, there's spawn happens, there's shad spawns that happen. And if you're in the Midwest where I grew up from, and where you grew up in Illinois to Indiana, that happens, that the spawn happens there. And it's also happening down here in Tennessee. I just think it makes a bigger impact of bass fishing country of what's going on for sure. And I think it's a great time to fish.
So also something that happens in April, just while I'm thinking about it, I had this question. The pollen gets on the water. Now I like backdoor in roommated with Scott at the last open that was on Santee Cooper, because he had to fish all three, and then he's buddies with Upshaw. So anyway, Scott was talking about how he is a wholehearted believer that the pollen totally screws up the fish. He doesn't know why scientifically. If they're on the bed, they stay on the bed. But if you're trying to catch fish that are biting, the pollen messes with them, something maybe with sight or their gills or something. Have you heard that? Are you a believer in that? Because April's a big pollen month as well.
I don't know if I'm a huge believer in that, because I've caught them on pollen mats. I'm like, I don't know if you're gonna be underneath a pollen mat.
So you've caught them fishing under pollen mats, not bedfish under pollen mats.
Yeah, okay. But I think that I think it negatively, even at Redcrest, in practice the water was really clean in a couple of areas, and then their pollen came in, and the pollen just started falling really heavily, and you couldn't see them. So it negatively impacts obviously your vision of seeing the fish. And it clouds up the water. So I think, of course, when you think of that, you're like, man, I don't know. Like, it just makes it like we're less effective in being able to do, fish shallow and actually sight fish them.
There we go. All right, here's what we're going to do. So I was talking with Mercer last night, and we were texting back and forth. I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I know on my behalf, I have a little bit of industry fatigue. We're coming off of the Classic. You had Redcrest and the Classic back to back. We've had all sorts of controversy in the industry. Everything has been blowing up. A lot of shows out there, and we're all trying to figure out, how do you cover it? How do you cover the fishing? Then you get into the fishing side, and I've got industry fatigue on the fishing side for guys who want to use words like asterisks and what should be legal and what shouldn't be legal and what should count and what shouldn't count. And I literally had a conversation with Mercer last night. He said, I'm tired. This is getting so out of control. And we talked about how we wanted to talk about fishing. So here's what we're going to do. I already saw a comment up here. I'll throw it up there. Anthony, he said, hope Matt puts his big boy pants on to press Jacob with some tough questions. So let's get the tough questions out of the way. If you even want to call them tough questions, let's do it for 5 minutes. And then I want to talk about the minnow, whether it's the mooch minnow, the armor shad, whatever it is, and compare that to the Alabama rig in the early days and your thoughts on that. And I also want to talk about cold water buzz baiting because in the Santee Cooper event that you won, I saw Zach Birch catch some fish on a buzz bait, and then I saw Greg Hackney and Christie start the Classic on top waters. And I remember you are one of the biggest proponents of, I think, upper 40s, low 50s buzz baiting. You did that in one of the Classics, I think on Hartwell.
Yeah, I was.
Then I also want to talk about, so like you were like the Indiana, Illinois, like there's been some more out of Indiana than Illinois, but that Midwest part of the country has not had any superstars come out of it. I'm going to get a hate mail from Doc Merkin and Chad Morgenthaler now. Chad qualifies, but he's Southern and then he moved to Missouri. But we've got Drew Gill and Trevor McKinney, one on the Elite Series, one on the BPT. And I know that Drew has said Illinois is a big reason as to why he's doing so well on the BPT. So we're going to dive into that. But first of all, does that sound like a game plan, Jacob?
Sounds like a good plan.
All right. First of all, let's dive into what everyone is talking about. The James Watson suspension that MLF came down just before Easter. If you don't follow the industry, if you've been living under a rock, he broke, I believe it was rules 7A, B, and C in the BPT rule book, suspended through December 31st, 2025, with the chance for reinstatement beginning January 1st, 2026. As an angler who's involved in the BPT, what did the anglers know about this? What was the communication with the anglers? Were there board of anglers that had any say into how this went down, what this went down? How did it go from an angler standpoint?
I think that, I'm on the board of anglers that we work with the BPT alongside of MLF and the MLFAA. That's, we don't get into like the rules side of rules and fractions, any of that kind of stuff. It's really just for us overall. It's just taking care of, like, say, hey, like for instance, like Cayuga happens and some stuff goes down there at Cayuga, and then we're making an adjustment to a rule. If there's a rule that does not get written the right way, we're making adjustments there and trying to work together. Or if there's complaints from anglers, I have an group of anglers that I represent. They call me up with an issue that they have with something. And that's sort of the extent of it. We try to push the league to try to do positive things for the anglers. And that's really the MLFAA that's the reason behind that. As far as rules infractions and things like that, that's completely league driven in upper management, and so I think there's a lot of things out there. To me, obviously there's a lot of negativity around a lot of things right now in the sport, whether it's the disqualification with New, or it's Watson's deal, or it's forward-facing sonar, and it's tough because the sport that you love so much, you want to get back to a positive vibe. I mean, and it's a tough thing to see because I think negativity it sells. Like if I do a positive video on YouTube right now, and it's like, hey, look, I want to talk about the 5 most positive things in bass fishing, it's going to do not great views. But if I do the 5 most negative gossip things in bass fishing right now, you're going to do 10 times the amount of views of what what you would do on anything else. And it's the nature, it's where we're at in the space, it's where we're at in the world. And it just sort of stinks. I mean, I feel like we all as anglers have to look to try to do better and try to, but I think at the same point in time, it's sort of a tough pill to swallow, because at some point in time, like, we have to push. I mean, there's a point in time to push on things. And there's a point in time and push on things and try to push the leagues to do better. Absolutely. But it's a tough pill to swallow because there's so much negativity in sport.
There you go. So that's the anglers had nothing to do, like that wasn't before the anglers. So the reason I say that was because in the other situation with bass, which was totally different because it was something that happened on the water, it went before a panel of 2 anglers who weren't in the tournament and someone. This wasn't that. This was, you guys woke up and learned about this DQ at the same time that the rest of us did.
100%. I had no clue what was going on that stuff. Like, to me, yeah, everybody sort of, like, I was sort of shocked when it transpired.
Awesome. There you go. That's what we said about that. This is a conversation that me and you had yesterday, and I want to talk about it because I think it's interesting, and it's not negative, but I think it's an important conversation to have. And that is something that you talked about the last time you were on the show, when you were talking about payouts, when you were talking about the health of the organization, which was which was the ability for the core group of anglers. Like, I mean, dude, you've had 24 top 10s and 35 regular season events on the BPT. You can look behind you. You're one of 10 guys who really doesn't have to worry about the day-to-day things. It's a fact. It is. You've put yourself in that position financially based on what you've done on and off of the water. But there's 90% of these guys, both on the BPT and the Elite Series. And it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I want to get your opinion on this. We talked a little bit about this, but then you were making money. So you were like, hey, I got to go. So, but it seems to me like you have a lot of guys, and I don't want to use that are uneasy about the future. And they're the core guys who we all heard of every day, the 30s, the early 40s, with a lot of career ahead of them, with young families that are either unsure about the future of their league or organization or unsure about the future of where they fit into it based on the trend of how fishing has gone recently. Is that something that needs to be talked about? And is there?
Yeah, I definitely think there's something that needs to be talked about on that. I mean, I think it's a tough situation on both sides. I mean, I also, and I said this in a seminar, and I said this seminar in Ohio, and I said that, like, look, if you haven't been using forward-facing sonar in the last 4 years and understanding the nuances within it, it's an angler that I've learned more in the last 4 years as a professional angler than I have in the entirety of understanding what bass actually do than my entire career. And so if you take an angler that has family and has young kids like I do right now, you want to spend that extra time at home. And now you have these young anglers that are hungry, that are working hard, that are out there every single day, and they know every little nuance within it. Now, I understand 99% of it as well, but I grew up with it. And I put a lot of time into. I grew up with it the last 4 years and really put the time into it and understanding it. But I do see things like, it's tough to compete. If you're not utilizing the technology, I think there's a lot of people that are worried. I think you look at a lot of anglers that grew up and understand the little nuances. I mean, Andy Morgan, I go turkey hunt with Andy Morgan all the time. Andy loves to go flip on the bank, and he's truthfully the top 3 best fishermen I've ever been in the boat with. Like, he's just insanely talented. But it negatively impacts his finishes because, of course, an angler's out there being able to generate more bites. I'm not a huge fan of chasing fish around on forward-facing sonar that are single fish out there like all the time. Like, I love to fish the bank. And I struggle, I'll be honest with you, I struggle with battling should I go to the bank and trust my gut on something that I feel like I need to be doing and things that should be transpiring, and sticking to utilizing, in scoping. Like, I struggle with that because I have those gut feelings of what I need to be doing and what the technology is allowing us to do now. So it's a really tough situation. And I'm not saying the technology is, evil, or it's just got to the point now that everybody's utilizing it. And there's anglers like a Drew Gill he's phenomenal with it. He's spent all the time, and it wasn't from the fact that he's worked his butt off to figure that out. Everybody's had that same opportunity. But so in the dream that these leagues have promoted, and talked about, hey, you can make this point, and to give them that technology and then to take it away, it's a tough situation there too. So I just don't know what the perfect scenario is. I know there's a lot of anglers that feel a certain way about where we're at in the sport. I know there's a lot of anglers that are worried about leagues and this and that and what they should do, but it's just I don't know if there's not a perfect answer to it. And like, I think that I've talked to a lot of great veterans of the sport that I have a lot of respect for, and there's not like, hey, this is what you got to do,
Is that talked about amongst the anglers at the top, at the top levels and throughout, just the uneasiness? I guess is that a fair word for it? The uneasiness that exists on both sides, with where this is all going to shake out and how everyone's going to find a spot and what's going to happen. I mean, because we're dealing with, we're dropping 10 from the Elite Series every single year now. And you got guys that are going, dude, well, it's not going to be any of the 9 that just came in. And you do have a lot of movement between leagues. Now, to me, having covered this for 17 years, it seems like it's the most the water is the murkiest as far as the next 5 years in professional fishing.
I would not disagree on that either. I would not. And I mean, it's not like a harp on negativity. It's just we just don't know where things are going to go. We don't know where the technology. I mean, there's it'll get to the point where we're using there's going to be so many things that transpire in the next 3 years that we have no clue what's getting worked on right now. A couple of things I've heard, but I don't know. It is the murkiest it's ever been. Yes, it is, because it's pretty straightforward. If you put your time in, if you understand how to flip, you understand how to cast, you understand this. I mean, at this point in time, with forward-facing sonar being such an impactful part of the sport, but being a most impactful part of the sport, rather than pitching and flipping, you might be focusing on your ranges and understanding what 20 feet, 40 feet, 80 feet is, and out in the backyard, and where I used to go flipping a cup. When I was a young kid, we had casting kids and everything else. And to try to be better at pitching and be more efficient at casting, it might be a deal that now people are going out there and putting 100-foot range in your backyard and making sure that you understand the range of what you're casting at. I don't know where it's at, but I also am 50-50 on it. Like I've utilized this technology. I've utilized things to me that have helped me be more efficient, and it's awesome when it goes down the right way, and I enjoy it. But it also, I also battle back and forth on it, Matt, because I feel like there's one side of it. Are we going to get to the point where our people love seeing fish caught? Okay. So we have live coverage. I struggle with this as well, because when you look back at some of the best TV shows of all time, you look at the Bassmaster TV shows where they have them edited. You look at the MLF Original Cup tournaments where they're edited and they have time to sort of break down exactly what's going on. But then with live and us always being on television, if I'm not seeing fish being caught, am I going to click off? Is your attention time going to be as long? So if you took it away, is it going to be a positive push for the sport with everything pushing towards live? And another thing that I struggle on the other side is, we struggle with continuing to bring younger anglers into the sport and have for years. And this point, there's more young anglers that are competing at the top of the sport or moving their way up the ladder faster than they ever have. So I think that's a positive as well in some regard. Now there's negatives to that as well too, but there's positives to that. So is it going to be a great shot in the arm to the sport if we continue to push technology and give that opportunity? Now on the flip side, is this what everything that the sport's going to be from here on out? Is it? I don't know. I think, on the bass side, I think there's a lot of veterans of the sport that are very worried about if they don't understand this technology in a very quick way, then just because of how great and how good these anglers are, that they'll be gone in 3 years. I mean, you're talking about anglers that are, I mean, that's just the facts behind it. That is the facts. I mean, I'm talking about veterans of the sport that have huge brands that will be gone because if you don't figure it out, you're not going to have those, good enough finishes, and it's tough. There's not a great answer to it. There's not, and I think it's a tough subject, but it's something that needs to be talked about.
I had Gene Gilliland sitting across from me last month, and he's on the technology committee for Bass. That is the stuff that they're doing behind the scenes with the anglers every single week. They want to get this right. That being said, this is something that hasn't really been talked about, that I haven't heard talked about. How important is it for both leagues? Okay, I'll ask a two-part question. How important is it to come out with a decision? I know it's a do something now. I applaud Bass and MLF for looking at the situation and not doing it, because even though it has been around for 4 or 5 years, 2024 or 2023 was the year that it blew up. 2024 is the year that they're analyzing it. How important is it for the veterans, for the young anglers, for the industry, for bait companies, for everything that is fishing? This is part one, for the leagues to come out and say, this is what the next 5 years of rules in regards to electronics are. If you're a veteran and it's here, you have to learn it or you're extinct. If you're a young angler and it's not here, you better brush up on your Bassmaster magazines because you're fishing patterns and not chasing individual fish. But then at least we know for the foreseeable future, there is some stability. How important is that for the leagues? And then the second part, and I'll let you talk, is how important is it for both leagues, MLF and Bass, to have the same to have the same thing, to have the same. If MLF does something and Bass does something, hey, it's the same rules for both. Or do you think it could be Wild West in one league and not in the other, and that wouldn't create even more division and even more changing?
I mean, for me, I would love to see some restrictions. Like, I mean, to an extent, I would love to see some restrictions on it. I think that needs to happen to an extent, because I think the optics of everything, like, look, we're putting forward-facing sonar on our transom now. We're doing this, we're doing that. You're adding $10,000 worth of options that never were there. And is it super impactful? I might utilize that technology maybe 10% of the time, or maybe I might not even turn it on, but 10%.
But I don't care about that. I just care about how important is it to know this is what it's going to be. Not what your opinion is, but this is what the leagues say it is.
It needs to have something to where there's some stability. I would agree.
For years to come. So Greg Hackney knows, okay, I better rethink the next time we go to Toledo Bend. Or
I think that needs to happen overall to where everybody knows what they're going to be doing in the next 5 years. I do agree with that. I think that, but the big thing is, like, both leagues somewhat. I talked to a few people over there. I've talked to both sides about, like, what my thoughts were on things, and like some of the anglers over there at Bass and as well. And it's like, if they could work together to ultimately figure out a scenario where they could agree on it, like, and make it like, as professional bass fishing, this is what we're going to roll with. That's what I would love to see, because it would make it easier on the Toyotas, it would make it easier on the Opens. It would make an easy understanding of what goes on. And it at least would give the anglers overall an understanding of what they needed to do in moving forward.
All right. When you came in, you won the All-American, when you were 19 in the Forest Wood Cup when you were 21.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was the reception like by the vets? Because when you jumped on to that FLW tour, there were a bunch of scary guys over there. Like, the Elite Series had the KVDs and Edwins and Skeets and the superstars. But, like, in my opinion, that time period on FLW had some really intimidating anglers on it.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, you think of, like, Brian Thrift and your Randall Tharps and
David Dudley, Scott Martin.
Yeah, I mean, you had a lot of great anglers that were in their peak of like
Andy Morgan.
Yeah, I mean, it was not easy. I think that, of course, you get a little bit of pushback. I feel like I was very confident in my, like, I was confident coming out there fishing. I don't feel like I was really arrogant, and maybe Andy would tell me differently. But I think there is a little bit, of, like, even being, I feel like, a veteran now, you look at young anglers and you look to want to like them and sort of bring them on. But, like, it is tough when you get a younger angler whipping you. Like, you're like, gosh dang, and outperforming you on the water. You're like, man, you have a decision to make as a veteran to look at, like, man, good for him. He's fishing hard. He's working hard. Or you have in your mind, like, man, that kid, I don't know. Like, you have to figure out which way you're going to go. And I'm always trying to, like, because I know where it was a difficult position to be in, going in, winning the cup early on, winning the All-American. I think it took a little bit of time. I think there was a little bit of, like, like, you're a young angler, this young punk with the flat bills winning this tournament. I think there was a little bit of that. And it took some time to sort of build a little bit of, have an opportunity to spend some time with those anglers and figure out the veterans of sport. Like, I think it takes a little bit of time to sort of work your way up the ladder and be able to gain that respect of those anglers. It doesn't really come with just wins.
I say that because I've talked to some of the incoming rookies from the Elite Series, and they said there is a massive divide from some of the veterans and some of the newcomers, and they feel like they're being dismissed because of how they're catching their fish based on how the veterans are receiving them. Like it's a very interesting dynamic, which when I was covering it, I always felt like, there's a, hey kid, there's a little bit, I don't want to use the term hazing at all, but there's a little bit of you kind of earn your place there and your right to speak. But I think there's definitely a disconnect going on between the rookies and the veterans. Like not all of them, obviously not all of them, but some. I was wondering, is that, are you also seeing that on the BPT between the older guys and the younger guys coming in to where they're dismissing the talent and there's not a mix? They're going, oh, those guys, I don't care if they've had 2 top 10s. They're doing it that way. That doesn't. And the younger guys are like, dude, these are the guys I freaking looked up to, and they're just being assholes to me.
Yeah. I think it's similar. I don't know, sir. It's like you earn your stripes. I think it took a little while. It's like you said, it's more of a hazing thing. It's like, all right, are you going to be here for the next? Are you going to establish your brand and come out here and win and do well? And after, I think there's a lot of that's gone on over the years. You know what I'm saying? I think that's just sort of part of it. I think it's amplified now, obviously with what's going on in the sport with technology. But I think that's always sort of been a part of it. I think it's sort of how it is with any other sport. You have your veterans. You're not going to just sit there and just, there's some anglers that took me under their wing and at least, gave me an opportunity early on. Like Matt Airy. Matt Airy was like a good friend of mine that we fished and we roomed together for years. And so you take some of those anglers that take a little bit of effort to say, hey man, how are you doing, man? Are you good? Like that means a lot to a young angler early on in their career, especially as a rookie coming in, because you just it's typically not a warm and bubbly feeling that you're going to get from the veterans. Like, hey buddy, we're happy you're here. Like,
especially when you're smoking them, which I mean, you came in on the cover of the FLW magazine, hailed as the second coming. Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily the warmest welcome by everyone. But I think it has amplified a little bit. Now, I think the biggest thing, that I look back is you just got to keep progressing as an angler, be respectful. And if you can do that, I mean, there's some times I feel like early on, there was a couple anglers that I rubbed the wrong way and they still dislike me to this day. It's just how it is. But there's certain scenarios that I feel like you just got to go out there, be respectful and do your job. And time will come where it's like, hey, those anglers you'll gain respect. So I think those anglers over there, it is a little bit of a shell shock for sure. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to dive into the fishing portion of the show. How long has it been since you've just had I know you do your podcast with the guys, you do your videos, but you just do a straight up fishing interview about techniques and tactics and that. It's probably been a while.
It's been a while. And right. I mean, I do a little bit of stuff on my own channel, but it's been a little while.
All right, it's BTL on a Wednesday with Jacob Wheeler. We'll be back right after this.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
In 2023, we became a household name in the crappie fishing world thanks to Power Breaks, the game changer. Hey, bass fishing world, buckle up, because you're next. It's going to be fun. Welcome to the next evolution of our product line, Power Breaks Sidekick, designed to install right on your shallow water acres. We are the first and only fishing brake company to offer a breakaway system. Just like with the Game Changer, the Power Breaks Sidekick has it as well. And it's not a matter of if you're going to need it, it's when. Power Breaks, the most durable fishing brakes available on the market today. Made right here in the USA with our rock-solid 2-year warranty. Hey, not all fishing brakes are built equally, and you owe it to yourself to find out why ours are different. Power Brake Sidekick. Order yours today at mypowerbrakes.com. You'll be glad you did.
Everything you need, one legendary brand. Time on Strike King.
AFCO. Any fish, any water.
All right, welcome back. BTL on a Wednesday, guys. I've been talking about this every day, and I'll continue to talk about this until the store closes. But the BTL Supports St. Jude t-shirt is up on basson.com the third consecutive year. The BTL listeners and viewers, you guys have really showed out over the past 2 years. 100% of these proceeds go to the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and then that money from the t-shirts actually goes to Adam Bartuzek's and I's entry. Like, you have to raise $5,000 for St. Jude, and then all the money after that, like based on how much you earn, is your boat draw. So I mean, there's teams that have been up there for that Wabasha tournament that have raised $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 every year. We were just shy of $10,000 last year. We had a great event at Giesenbrauer Beer Company up in New Prague, Minnesota, where we did about a little over, I think, $5,000 on that. But the t-shirts aren't going well. I'll throw that picture up right now. Link for that t-shirt. There's the St. Jude fundraiser t-shirt. Link in the bio in the description for that. $29.95. I can't get away from the shipping because I have them ship it. You're about $38 in for the t-shirt, but like I said, 100% of the proceeds for that, you know, after the shipping and all that, go to St. Jude while you're there. The store is open if you want to purchase some Frank Scalish Signature Series or add any other BTL merchandise. That store is also open, and you get a die cut 4x6 BTL sticker that you can put on your John boat, your bass boat, your car, your wife's car, whatever you want with it. There you go. There's my pitch, Jacob.
That's good. That's a really cool event. That's really a cool event. I've actually fished it twice, I think.
Oh yeah, I know you have. You have been up there. I've been trying to explain to people what it's like. Now it's grown over the past years, but like, did they have the banquet and all that stuff when you fished it?
Yeah, I had a banquet, and it was really cool.
As far as charity bass tournaments, it raised $1.1 million last year, which is the biggest charity, and it's a hidden gem up north. So the challenge, and I work with Gretchen and Katie on this all the time, is to maintain that core base of the guys that have been there for 25 years, that have supported it, that it's the fabric of their fishing community up there, but to also grow it to raise more money for St. Jude without losing that tournament. So that's what they're working on right now, because I mean, you don't want to blow the thing up and then it's like, dude, we had this really cool thing that raised $7 million and now there's all this outside influence coming in. Like, you got to keep it like that and then figure out ways to build around it.
You definitely do. And that event's super unique. It's one of the coolest events I've ever been to. It's obviously great because it's great fishing as well. And I mean, and then a lot of the anglers, I mean, they spend all year trying to push and trying to raise money for St. Jude. And that's just a really cool event that I'm like, man, it was a lot of fun when I was able to go up there, and I fished it with DQ from Rapala and twice. And it was a lot of really good people that fished that event.
The only problem is it's the first week of May. And if we talk about April being the month of bass fishing, probably that first weekend in May is the busiest week in tournament bass. Like, everything has something the first week of May.
It is, and that's like, I have a tournament this year. I think I've had a tournament every year for the last like 4 years. Then they had the one in the fall, maybe, that they can't. They were flooded out, and So I always try to, if I can, go up there and fish them, but I just haven't been able to do them. Like every single year, I'm looking at the schedule. I'm like, nope, can't do it. It's sort of like a tough deal, but it is probably the toughest time to get away and go up north, but it's well worth it if anybody gets the opportunity to do so.
All right. Let's talk Midwest superstars. You're Indiana. I remember talking to you about fishing some of those Southern Illinois lakes back in the day. The two most notable guys right now would be Drew Gill, who has an invitational win, off to a great start on the Bass Pro Tour. I think he's 21, 22 years old. I just smoked him in bowling at the Bassmaster Classic, though. I mean, just dummied him. Didn't even have a chance. And then McKinney over on the Elite Series. You saw what he did in the Opens, and then to go out and catch 130 pounds on fork at a number of different ways. I mean, the dude's boat flipping 6-pounders on a jig with a broken rod, and he's so young that I think he called it a pistol grip, which that's the opposite end of the rod, but whatever. Talk about do you know these guys? I know Drew talked about how he thought Illinois helped him become an angler like this. I know Trey has fished extensively across Southern Illinois in high school stuff. What are your thoughts on these two cats?
I love to see it, man. To me, to see anglers coming out of the Midwest, I mean, I put like Indiana, Ohio, Illinois in the same sort of bucket. Like we have sort of we were dealt a tough hand as far as fisheries. It is what it is. I mean, that's the facts behind it. I mean, when you and it's tough because you typically have a hard time to generate a ton of bites. You know what I'm saying? It's not a deal where you just get a lot of bites in either any of those states. Now there's some lakes that are awesome and they have times and they go up in streaks of really being really, really good. But to see it's crazy because there was Shad Shank that came out of Indiana, maybe West Thomas. I always look at Terry McWilliams.
Wasn't he Monsanto? Was he sponsored by John Deere for a while? Shad, or was he Monsanto? He was always in some sort of farming sponsorship, and then he just hung it up in his prime. He's like, "Hey, I'm retiring. Had a good run." Yeah, like there were some anglers that had the opportunity to fish professionally, but never that I would say that really just blew it out of the water and had great success. Mm-hmm. And so to see these young anglers coming up out of Illinois in the Midwest, it's really it's promising because it's still, it's very difficult. Typically, I think Drew actually fished, my college tournament. And I've talked to Drew several times now. I'm really impressed with how he processes information and how he views certain things and looks at lakes and figures it out. But he's learned because he's traveled around a lot. And I think a lot of college anglers as well have learned because they get to fish so many different places that they understand when they get out there fishing the Toyotas or the Opens, they have a better understanding of what's going down. I mean, you look at Drew, he's fishing Toyotas, he's fishing invitationals, he's fishing the BPT. When you're able to continue to fish and process information and put yourself in positions of figuring out what they're doing on the fly, you have so much current information of what's transpiring in the sport right now, not what's happening 2 years ago, right now in the space that you're dangerous. And, he's obviously it's actually surprising me at how high of a level he personally has been fishing at throughout every single tournament. He doesn't have, I think his worst tournament this year was probably Santee. And then Trey seems like he did great on the open side of things and killed it and did a really good job there. And then goes into fishing the open or into fishing the elites and having 2 great tournaments as well. But I think the thing is so interesting to me is you wouldn't think, I know a lot of anglers put it's asterisks because they're catching them on forward facing sonar. I'm you don't get out of Indiana or out of Illinois or out of Ohio by forward facing sonar exclusively. You typically if you're going to do well in those states, for the most part, you're going to be fishing, flipping and pitching, wanting a chatterbait around, throwing a buzz bait. That's going to have to be at some point in time a part of your arsenal if you're going to be able to get out of those states and compete. So I just, to me, I guess if you're fishing Table Rock and you're a great local hammer on Table Rock, yes, you can exclusively
always use forward-facing sonar. I know Drew's a huge proponent of forward-facing sonar, but that's something that I look at those anglers as just very talented anglers and anglers that have a very strong work ethic. And I think that's the biggest difference between those two anglers versus, some other anglers that are coming up. They put the time in for sure.
Does it help to have like a little group around you? It seems like we've seen, like, obviously, I think people forget, like, okay, Gary Klein started out from the West Coast. He was in his teens. He's probably would be the first like guy who was like, hey, I'm going to come out and do this deal. Obviously, we saw KVD, but it's not new. I mean, like Casey Ashley was super young, Brandon Polinick, yourself, like there, we've seen it. We've seen it happen, but those seem to be more individuals. What I'm seeing the last couple of years are groups of guys, like throw the JT Tompkins, JT Tompkins and Williams and those guys, like they're rooming together. Seems to me like they're in a little bit of a bubble. They're pushing each other. They're bouncing ideas off of each other. You seem to have that group going. I mean, literally, I told my buddy, I said, I got Wheeler on tomorrow, and he's like, ask him if him and DC and if they're going to win every single tournament from now. And I like went back and I was like, that is legitimately a possibility on this, but how important is it to have other guys that are pushing you? Cause right now there's a lot of young dudes that I feel like are working with, pushing each other, talking with, like I was talking to someone at the Classic who was like, dude, like, Drew Gill and JT Tompkins were having a conversation and they were just like back and forth on all this stuff. Like, how important is it to have that nucleus? And are we in a time right now where there's more young talent than there ever has been, regardless of how they're catching them?
Yeah, I think you're at this position right now that there's a influx of young anglers and young talent that just understands how to catch them. Like you said, no matter how they're catching them, they just get it. And they understand it, and they understand the techniques. They have little nuances with them, and each angler is doing something a little bit different. They have their own system of how they like to fish, how they like to process information, how they like to cover bodies of water, what areas, the lakes they like to cover and really fish. And I think that obviously helps a lot. I think it's really important when you have a group of guys that, to me, like Dustin and Mark and Adrian are like brothers to me. Like they're like your home away from home, and it's so easy to get into a little bit of a tizzy and jump into this negative, whirlwind, of the sport. And when you have a group of guys that you're just hanging out, it's just like you're hanging out with your buddies, and you're hanging out with your buddies, and it's not a big deal. I think it lessens the pressure of what's really transpiring in the tournament as well. You go back, you play, you play video games, or you're playing board games or poker or something like that, and you're having fun. You're just BSing around. I think it takes a little bit of that stress reliever, just sort of stepping away from it. And it's all the tournament all the time. And it's also really important to have and talk about, like, Adrian's a tinkerer, and I think that's something that those guys, with JT Tompkins and all those anglers that are competing, like, you have each person has their own style, if you will, and techniques they really like. And so you learn off of so many different things, and you push each other to perform better. And one angler's getting up earlier than the rest of everybody else. And you're like, dang, dude, that guy's outworking the whole house, So there's a lot of positives in it, you know what I'm saying? And I think that is something that, they're doing a good job, because as long as you can keep it. I mean, listen, this is the only thing about rooming with other people and having a group of guys is it's an individual sport, and no one's going to tell, like we've had these conversations with us, like, look, no one's going to tell you how to beat them. Like, that's just not the deal. Like, you're going to be like, hey, look, we push each other to work harder. You do that. And I think that as long as everybody understands that aspect and just says, look, we're all out here to try to win, and we're all out here to try to perform at a high level, then and you have a friendship, it's really a powerful thing.
Okay, bait wise, the minnow, what do you call it? What do you call the Demiki or strolling? Like, if you were to do like jerk bait, crank bait, but then you also have like chatter bait, which is a brand but not really a brand, a category. Like, what is the end all be all for anything that's related to a jig head and with a 3 to 8 inch minnow on it. What are you calling that now?
I think the best term is like shaking the minnow or shake and bake, like shaking the minnow. Like that's probably the most recent term that I hear the most. Is probably what it is. Like most people refer to that. I mean, mid-strolling is interesting.
That sounds way too technical.
It's way too technical. So like shaking a minnow to me is like dumb it down. Like shaking a minnow, like shake and bake, shaking a minnow. Like that simple it's very simple. Like to me, that's what we're doing. Yeah, I mean,
because I want to call it Demiki, which I know is a brand name, which I know, I mean, you got a Crush City sweatshirt on and have it. So you're the guy, you're going, hey, but I mean, I think Demiki is kind of like Cinco.
Yeah,
just as a whole. What did you call it? What did you call it in on the Elite Series tournament? Where you won on the smallmouth. You called it a Demiki. Okay, it's a Demiki.
Which in that scenario, though, you're fishing vertical. So
okay.
It's like a Demiki to me is like you're dropping down and you're fishing it vertical and you're shaking it. And now it has the same action, but casting, to me, that's a different technique.
Shaking a minnow. What did Gussie call it? Because he was kind of doing
But see, Gussie is Gussie. So moping and Demiki rigging is the same thing.
Okay.
That is the same. It's in the same bucket. Okay, over here. Mid-strolling, tight lining, shaking a minnow, shake and bake, all of that is in this bucket over here. It's a to me, this is vertical, this is casting. So it's to me, you have to, and so like I had a conversation because like mid-strolling, the origination of it, like I knew it was like maybe mid 2000s, somebody made it called it mid-strolling or Biwa rig from the Japan, Japanese anglers over there on the JDM side. But then you also look at East Tennessee and tight lining and what that is. And that was, I mean, guys were doing that tight lining in the 90s with hair jigs in East Tennessee. Then they switched over to throwing a small little minnow and tight lining and doing the same thing. So to me, that's the same bucket that they were doing that over in Japan. And then we were doing that here in the East Tennessee on some of these highland reservoirs. And I think you look at like, I think the first person I really saw doing it a lot was like maybe Brandon Lester, tight lining, and then Ott Defoe's done it, in the 2000s. That was a really popular East Tennessee technique. And so, I mean, anyway, so that's sort of the back history to me, of like a minnow and the progression of it in the sport.
So then there's 2011, October, Paul Elias. If you want to know more about that story, go back earlier this year. I had Russ Lane on, who I didn't know was rooming with Paul Elias in that tournament. Some really cool backstory on that Alabama rig the first time that really got exposed in that FLW Invitational and what guys were doing and how they got them and the whole 9 yards. That was probably one of my favorite shows of the year. But very rapidly, there was this thing's going to be 12 months out of the year. There won't be a fish caught without it. And it was. Everybody had the damn thing tied on. And then Bass came out and said no on the Elite Series. They let it go for the Opens for a year. I remember there were like that whole year, pretty much everything was one on the Opens on it. You could still use it in the MLF Cups. At the time, I remember that first cup on a Amistad, everybody was going around slinging it on the 8-foot swim bait rods with the braid and the 6-inch. Anyway, little backstory there. But then, even locally, it seemed it kind of found its place. It found its niche. We learned it wasn't the end all be all. There were definitely times that it was the bait and you were fishing for second if you didn't have it. But there were also a lot of times where guys got burned by it and it was one on a more traditional bait. And now it's just it was so bad at one point at BTL, we refused to say the term Alabama rig, and Jeffries referred to it as the rig we do not speak of. Wow. That's how burned out it got in that time period for that year. I say that to say right now, shaking a minnow, Demiki, moping, strolling. There's a fear that, hey, everything is going to be one on this 12 months out of the year for the history of fishing. The Classic changed that a little bit, which was an interesting tournament. It was a time that I think we needed it. But I mean, you look at Redcrest, the top 8 of the top 10, and you look what Dustin did. I mean, you were part of that massacre. I mean, I think he knew that was going down before it went down and was laughing and knew everyone was fishing for second.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Really? Because
No.
you would know better than anyone.
I know Dustin well, like, and of course, his mindset, like I could just tell, like he understands current better than any angler that I've ever been around. Like as far as understanding how a bass relates to current, especially on that Coosa River, it's like mind blowing how he can read it so well by just looking at the current and understanding where they're going to set up because he's done it his whole life. Okay. So like in my mind, I come in after that tournament. I come in because like he started down the way on the lower end. Like it was Michael Neal. We were all fit. Like there's a whole big area that there was like Michael Neal, Nick Hatfield, half the top 10 was fishing this big area. And he started in that same zone. And then he took off and he ran north. And I'm like, I bet you that sucker's running up towards the dam because I knew he caught him in the current the day before. He's like, dude, I just, I got to go do my thing, which he loves to fish the current. So I just am hearing Score Tracker pop off, pop, 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 and he's catching them. And I'm like, man, he's just running his progression probably up the river and just going and catching 3 or 4, catching 3 or 4, catching 3 or 4. And I come in and I'm like, how the heck I said, good job, man. You had it dialed in the whole time. You won, doing your thing. And he's like, no, dude, I caught him on a mooch minnow. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, I caught him on a mooch minnow. I caught him like on one place. Like it was insane. He said, I literally go in to check a couple places that I fish in this area that he's fished. He's like, I want to fish. And I'm like, in the tournament, and I catch 2 bass. He catches a 3-pounder and a 4-pounder. And he's like, okay, that's cool. And then he runs up the river, he said, in the tournament. Like this is like day 2 or something. And so he said, I stopped in there thinking I would catch 3 or 4 bass. And I shut down and they're everywhere. And I didn't need to leave to go to like, why leave? And I'm like, I talked to AJ about it. Even like all the guys, even Cole Floyd, and they're like, how did no one else find that? Because it was so close to everything else. Mm-hmm. It was crazy. But he did that same thing. Dustin's really good strategically. He did the exact same thing at Toledo Bend. He caught 2 bass, and he said the knockout round in the area, went back to that area and won the tournament, caught 80 pounds that same zone. Like it just progressed to being that. And I'm like, that's the kind of decisions you have to make. But I was shocked. I'm not even gonna lie. It's easy to look at it like he knew he was going to catch 100 pounds there, but trust me, when he did not.
There you go. There's the backstory.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. So I talked about the rig. You just broke down the history of the minnow. Where does this minnow thing stand? Is it the most dominant bait for the next 5 to 10 years? Is it going to find its niche? Like, is it going to put all the jerkbait, crankbait, spinnerbait companies out of business to where no one will even have them in the boat and they'll have 80 different types of minnows and 20 different types of jig heads? What's your overall thought on the whole thing?
Personally, I think if you look at the Alabama rig, and you look at the progression of it, like you said, it bass adapt to seeing a ton of Alabama rigs. They see it a lot. They understand what's going on. They get hooked. And with catch and release, a lot of these fish have been caught several times. It takes 1 or 2 times for a bass to get caught on something, and they're like, probably not going to bite it again. I think what's going to happen in the progression is we were sort of in that stage beforehand, like that you threw any minnow and you caught them. Okay. Now it's getting to the position where like Table Rock and Highland Reservoirs, everyone from BFL anglers to club anglers are shaking a minnow and doing the shake and bake technique. And that is like, they're seeing it every weekend, every day, every it's just part of it, right? So then that's sort of like, that's making them a little bit more weary. And I think the progression is going to be that it's always going to be a part of the game, but there's going to be way more nuance to it and understanding the actions of the baits, understanding, the colors, the profiles, what they're doing. It's going to be more about what you're using, what bait, what the action is, how it's used, what your weight is, in your presentation and generating the bite. It's just not going to be a deal you pitch out there and they're just going to instantly grab it. Like,
yeah, but is it always going to be a minnow? Like, you're talking about making minute adjustments, but you're still chucking a little minnow on a jig head at them, and there's still a bunch of hard baits and stuff sitting on the shelves.
No, I don't think what's going to happen is, okay, look, I said this the other day. I said, so like Toledo Bend was insane how many fish were out there, out offshore. Guys are still going to be able to catch fish on a minnow and a jerk bait just because that's how it is. But your numbers of bites. So say we were catching 15 bass in a single day out there on Toledo Bend on the average. Now your bite numbers are going to go down to 7.
Okay.
All right. Now some of them bigger ones won't bite because they've seen that. And some of the tournaments or the weights are going to go lower. And now it becomes the grass fish are going to start to play a little bit more. Because
so we're in a boom right now. We've seen all these tournaments with mega weights and mega sacks and these guys pitching to fish and these 7-pounders are swimming up and eating it, which looks like it's the case. I mean, you talk to the guys who are out there, you actually do it. You're like, dude, I pitched 100 fish and 5 of them ate it. I'm batting 5%, but it doesn't look like that. So you think right now you have is like it was with the first year of the Alabama rig, and it'll slowly kind of correct itself like that.
I think it'll trend. I still think it'll be a huge, it'll hit a peak at a certain point in time over the next year or two, but it'll always be a part of the arsenal. And I truly feel like this is more so like a Cinco is. Like, you're going to have to always, this is not like an Alabama rig. I think this is going to be a Cinco. And when it is the time of year, you are definitely going to have to be utilizing that bait. And it's always going to be here because it's such a finesse, subtle action. Like, when I look at like baits that stood the test of time, it's typically subtle actions tend to trend longer than, a really hard hitting. Look at like a Shad Rap, super finesse, tight wiggling crankbait, still catches them today. To me, that's what I look at. Like, I think it will always play in tournaments from here on out. The rest of the sport, now there's going to be nuance within it, but is it going to be as dominant? I don't believe that. And I don't. In 5 years from now, I think your top 10 is going to look a little bit different, and the pressure, because what it is we, by teaching and seeing how much of an impact it is, and every angler's out there and every local angler and club anglers out there fishing that way. To an extent, now you educate the angler and then you educate the fish, and then the fish. That's why it's a fine line as a professional angler. Sometimes you figure something out and you don't want to give it up, because as soon as you educate the anglers out there and it becomes a huge ordeal, you can't. It's done with. Like, it's like a hair jig on the Tennessee River used to be insane before it was blown up, and now it's harder to generate as many bites on a hair jig because they see it every day. So it 100% will change. There'll still be nuances within it, but I do think it'll be the Cinco still. Like, it's going to be a part of the time that you're going to always have to have that bait tied on during the pre-spawn time of the year.
What about during summer? What about during fall? What about?
I mean, summertime is unique, and there's nuances within it. Like, it's like, okay, you're fishing bait chasers is different than fishing cover utilizing it. Like, there's nuances. It's like the same thing of like throwing. Like, it's different. Like the Red Crest was a lot of bait chasers.
Yes, but Santee Cooper, where you saw Alton Jr. and you do it a little, and Lucas and a number of those guys, that was cover, where you were seeing it, shaking it over the cover. The fish were coming out and eating it, similar to what we've seen before on a jerk bait, or the same type of cover that you would chuck a jig in and drag it 5 years ago.
Absolutely. And that, yes. Different, completely different deal. Like, it's like will guys find a way to make it as dominant this summer? I mean, as we go into summer tournaments, specifically with largemouth on like, I understand that's been going on St. Clair with the big 5-inch white flukes and that type of stuff. But will we see the tournaments that are largemouth tournaments? Will we see guys going, oh crap, it works in the summer too, just different? Or yes. Yeah. So like the difference is there. That's a nuance. It's a completely different deal. Like, schools of fish, like, think about this. Okay. Think about it. So what was the most dominant offshore technique, or top 3? Well, it would be in the top 3, maybe not the most dominant. What was one of the most dominant techniques in the top 3 offshore schools of fish in the last 10 years? In my mind,
heavy jig head on a paddle tail swim bait.
No.
Crankbait?
A scrounger.
Really?
A scrounger. Think about this. Think about this. A scrounger is one of the most impactful baits in the last 10, probably 5 years. Look at Lambert. Look at I've won a lot of money on them.
Yeah.
I won a Toyota Series at Pickwick on it. I caught him cranking, and I caught him on that. I've caught him it's a bait that's always been like a top 5 bait. If you don't have a scrounger tied on the Tennessee River in the summertime, you pretty much don't know what you're doing. That's how impactful it has been over the last 10 years. If you're a Tennessee ledge fisherman or an offshore fisherman, that was a super impactful technique. And it's now I think that that freeloader has taken place of that because you have a more consistent action and you're keeping in the strike zone. It's not the same as chasing around bait chasers. Yes, it's impactful, but you're able to keep that bait in the strike zone. And the problem with the scrounger was you would have to go through 15 of them to find a good one, or 10 of them, and you have to play with the bills, and they were so inconsistent. And then you put this bait on it and it didn't work right, and you put that bait on it, and it was so fickle. So that's why it was always only a few people really knew how to get the good ones out of it. Now with a jig head on a 3/16 ounce jig head or a 1/4 ounce jig head and a freeloader, you cast it out there on a 7.0 medium action spinning rod, and you impart action and it's rocking down there. It's doing the same thing, but you're keeping it in the strike zone and they're eating it. That to me is a progression of it. It's not that is always it's always been a deal over the last 5 years, 10 years, but that's worked. But now you're doing it just a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
Now there'll be a time it will be impactful as well. So
will there be guys competing for Angler of the Years without it in their arsenal in the next 5 years? Without that technique in their arsenal?
No. I don't think you can. I think you have to have it. I think you have to understand it, because it's going to trend. We're still not at the peak.
The peak.
The peak's in 2 years, probably 3 years. Once it gets to the point where it's the most dominant technique that this sport has seen in the last 5 years, no doubt. But we're not at the peak yet. The peak will be in probably 2 years, and then it's as every fish. Think about it. You won't be able to win Santee Cooper the way I did, and how the other guys made top 10s in next year. That won't happen because they've seen it. The reason why it's such a big deal is when you're able to show that to fish that have not seen it, it's super impactful. They're like, oh, shoot, what? They're going to eat it. And so they hadn't been fished for in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So once you start to teach and you start to win tournaments doing it in certain ways and the progression of it, then that's going to change, and those fish are going to change. They're going to adapt, and then it's not going to be as impactful as it once was. So I think that's 2-3 years out.
Is it still going to be an impactful bait, even if you're doing this Lake Lanier deal, like your buddy Andy Morgan, all these guys are doing with no forward-facing sonar whatsoever? I mean, is this a bait that guys are throwing without FFS as well?
I had a friend of mine the other day. He took an angler out, and he doesn't have his live scope stopped working. And he said, I was out and I was throwing a swim bait around, and I couldn't. I caught a few. He was smallmouth fishing.
Mm-hmm.
On the Tennessee River, he was smallmouth fishing. And he said he picked up a freeloader, and him and his client, he was the guy who was fishing with him. He's casting out there, just started shaking and catching the heck out of him. So I've caught him personally where I'm not looking at my sonar. I've caught him personally where you fish it shallow. I think it's a progression of that, and I don't think that, to me, I think there's a progression of it. I think there's going to be guys that I can go to a pond right now. For instance, when I'm fishing a school of fish offshore, I'm not looking at my bait. I might look at my cast, make a cast, and my fish hits the bottom, and then I'm imparting the action, and I know what that bait's doing down there. I'm not paying attention they're either going to bite it or not. You know what I'm saying? It's not I don't know. You don't have to have forward facing sonar for that to work.
Will we see a major tournament? This is a spectrum question. Will we see a major tournament won on a minnow less than 2 inches in length in the next 5 years? The next 2 years. Less than 2 inches in length. A micro minnow.
That's a tough one. 2 inches, less than 2 inches? I don't know. Because, I mean, you think of like a Bobby Garland being 2 inches long. That's pretty small.
Yeah.
I mean, it just depends on what time of year it is. I mean, because you got to understand, like the forage does get that small. It does get that small, but typically in the fall it happens. I don't know if it's going to be a win. Less than 2 inches, probably not.
2 inches or less. All right. Now, what about the other end? Will we see a win on this technique on a bait 8 inches, 7 inches, 7 inches or larger on a minnow?
Yes.
Is that, I know, dude, I don't, you know, that's the next frontier, isn't it? Magnum.
Well, not Magnum, but
like
this
just those big ones.
You have to understand the progression.
We got to be careful in this conversation. We're going to get clips taken out of it and then put on social media.
Yeah, the progression of things is the fact, okay, behind it.
Yeah.
So like my thinking on this. So in the wintertime, bait size little bait does not necessarily have to, it doesn't mean little fish. Like you catch big, smaller profile because they're focused on smaller bait. After the post spawn, all right, after they get done spawning, when they get in that post spawn aspect, they're eating gizzards, they're eating larger bait fish. That's when a larger profile tends to play more.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that's when you'll see it play more often. So that's why I'm saying that I think that there's room. Like I still think your smaller profiles of your 3 to 4 inch baits will play for, will be the main, or 2 to 4 inch baits in the pre-spawn will be key in the wintertime. Mm-hmm. But then in the post spawn, that's going to be a progression of larger baits.
I got to get out of here in like 10 minutes. You got 10 more minutes?
Yeah, I do.
Like 8 more minutes. All right. I mentioned it. I teased it in the first part of the show, the cold water buzz bait. That, I mean, dude, I turned on day one of the Classic at Greg Hackney's throwing a plopper. Now I know it'd been unseasonably warm in Oklahoma that time of the year. They were dealing with mid to upper 50s water temperature. Some fish trying to get on the beds. I'd heard rumors a couple guys bed fished in that Classic, but also on Santee, Zach Burge, I watched him catch a fish on a buzz bait as well, and that was really cold weather. And I do remember you throwing it. Was it on Hart? Do you remember when you threw that buzz bait in the Classic? It was freaking cold, wasn't it?
Water temperature. I remember that water temperature went from like it was 52.3 in practice. 52.3. It was cold. Like water was 51 to 52.3, and they would absolutely annihilate it. It was crazy.
What made you tie that on, and why? I mean, there's a lot of parts of the country that are upper 40s, low 50s right now. Okay, it's just hard to get confidence in that, dude.
The key with that was that the water was down a few years prior to that, and then all that shallow cover grew up. So shallow little bushes, sticks, and there was a lot of cover that was like shallow cover, like 2-3 foot and less. And so those fish were really like, there was a lot of shad in the backs of the pockets as the water was warming up. And so there was a lot of bait fish activity. These fish were related to this super shallow cover. And you couldn't really, like, you could probably throw in a swim jig now that, like, I could see that maybe being a bait to throw. But you really couldn't, throw a chatterbait over that great, like in the shallower stuff that I wanted to fish. And so I picked up a buzz bait, and like the first little corner I came to, a one came up there and ate it. And then I just got confidence in it. And I said, well, I can just throw this the whole tournament and catch them, and caught several of the fish that I weighed in, probably half the fish I weighed in that tournament. They were on a buzz bait. And so it's just more so. We don't think, like, there's times they'll bite a swim jig. Like, I mean, you think of the guys in Alabama that swim a swim jig around grass and stuff. When there's shallow cover present, they'll bite a buzz bait in 50-degree water temperature, but it's just depending on how they set up. It's like all about where the bass is in the water column. If the bass is in a foot of water and it's 50 degrees and you want a buzz bait over his head, there's a chance that he's going to come up there and eat it. pretty good chance. But if he's in 5 foot of water on a highland reservoir and he's sitting in the bottom of a laydown in 50-degree water temperature, probably not a really good chance of that fish coming up there and smoking your buzzbait. So I think they just don't travel as far for baits in that pre-spawn. And then you have to, that's when it sort of comes in. Like there's times when you catch the biggest bass in the lake on a topwater bait. And that's why I got to see that too. Like Hackney throwing a plopper. I'm like, oh gosh. Like
I've always heard that. Why do you always hear the guys go, man, I'm not going to get many bites, but if I do, it'll sure be the right one.
Because I think the big pre-spawn females slide up first, and they get them big females that get up there moving around in the mornings. They sort of are hunting around, and you typically don't get a lot of bites that time of year period on a topwater. You're just not. So you're expecting it to be, and a topwater typically is a little bit bigger, bigger profile, has more action to it. So you think like, okay, if I put a topwater in my hand, like you're not going to get as many bites. There's not as many bass shallow, but the ones that are shallow are the ones that are your first spawners of the year, which we always talk about, the first spawn, the biggest bass. And I think that's probably where that comes from more than anything.
We were talking about baits that we thought were going to be the end all be all. Dude, remember when the plopper hit the market? Like we were like, and you'd go in Oklahoma, and if it was an 80 boat tournament, you'd have your 5 guys that always start out dragging a jig on a brush pile, and you'd have 75 guys, blue, 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 blue. And then the fight in the parking lot would be whether it was bone or black.
It was, I actually got a fourth in a cup. Actually, the one Watson won at that open at Watson. That Watson one, I got second on through a buzzbait and a plopper. It was.
But they got conditioned to that 110%.
In certain areas of the country, they have. Yeah, they have. Like again, places they don't see it, they still bite it. But places
you go to the Ozarks and throw it, it ain't like it used to be.
No. Because they see it all the time. Yeah, like I think that's good. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. You think the same thing. You're saying the same thing's going to eventually happen to the minnow, even though this is where I differ with that. If we go back to that just for a second, where I differ with that is, are they becoming conditioned to it because they eat it and visually recognize it, or are they becoming conditioned to it because of the signature that the bait has, and therefore a soft plastic, a Damiki, a drop shot, a minnow is much harder for the fish to become conditioned to because it doesn't have a lateral line signature like an Alabama rig or a plopper or a crankbait?
I think also you have to factor in that like a plopper, you're not fishing for the largest population of fish in the lake as well. Like it's a very small. The amount of fish that were up there doing that deal in the fall and when that plays on the Ozarks is 10% of the bass. And so you're fishing for 10% of the bass, but you were so efficient with a plopping style bait to be able to cover a lot of water that it was just an efficiency thing. And you were able to cover a lot of water and generate some big bites. So I think that so it's quicker for them to get accustomed to that. And then, yeah, of course, like you're sort of, I don't know if it's a lateral line thing. I think it's more so a deal that it's just more subtle. The more subtle it is, the longevity of, do fish get accustomed to seeing wacky worms? Have they? No. They still have been, there's times that they won't bite it, but they still bite the heck out of it. It's probably one of the most, there's more fish caught on a wacky worm, stick worm than probably anything, in bass fishing in any year's time. And so I think that there's things like that. And I think that like a freeloader and baits like that that's the progression of it. I mean, it'll always be a player.
My boy Dylan Thompson, we just talk about like little tweaks and stuff on this. It brought up to mind. So he was using a line through Damiki. Look at this. So that's a bobber stop, and then it's the head with a hook on it, but there's also a screw lock there, and then you can add it's a very interesting setup there.
Huh.
See that line through with the swivel on the back end of it?
The swivel is that connected?
Yeah. So the line, there's a line through right here. So when it hooks this, Here's what I don't understand. I don't understand how he can have that hook on it too.
So what I think is the hooks
connected to the bait, and then there's also another line through.
That's not a level. That's not a line through there on the treble hook. I don't think. I think that's just like a metal ring where
there has to be, because look, he's got a bobber stop on the top.
Yeah, but I'm wondering. Oh, so you think that's a line through to where he's tying it through to that? Oh, I see what you're saying. So it's a jig head that he drilled through to put a line through that to the bottom where there's a treble hook.
Yeah, someone knows the name of it, I promise you, because I think I've talked about it before on the show, but I can't remember the name of it because CJ Glenn, when he was down, gave me a pack of them. But I'm just talking like just little bitty tweaks and stuff. He top 10 the Yoda on that.
That's interesting. Yeah. Where was that
at? That's on the MLF website.
Oh, what was the lake on?
Toledo Bend.
Oh, Toledo, he made a top 10 on that. That's crazy. They were probably ticking it, and then they were.
Yeah, that's what he said.
They were ticking it, and he had a little line through there.
The only guy that I remember doing that was when those paddle tails got popular, and Kennedy was just farming 25 pounds on the St. Lawrence River. He was like doing all sorts of crap to try to keep those 6-pound smallmouth from jumping off when he jam them. And he was doing like line throughs with treble hooks and stuff like that, trying to figure out how the hell to keep those smallmouth from, Reno, Tim Renault power tackle.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah. I'm not seeing that one.
Oh, I gotta make. So okay, now I don't feel so bad as a person. So I did the Bass After Dark, and they were like the worst lures ever, and I was like, this power tackle lateral shad. and then
all that.
And then I was talking with the dude who's like, yeah, man, like he heard that like they were like, that wasn't cool. And I was like, man, I felt bad. Like I never thought it would like actually get. So there's a shout out right there. That's a cool new jig head that's going out there. There's my good deed, in life.
That's hilarious.
Making up for that. All right. Two last questions, Jacob, then I'll let you go.
Mm-hmm.
The best decision you've ever made in your career? On or off the water, your career as a whole.
Dang, that's a tough one. Probably, dude, that's such a weird. Well, on the water would be like tournament wise, it would probably be fishing up the river at Lanier with that Forestwood Cup in the background, like, and doing my thing, like just fishing shallow Indiana style, like, and like understanding. I remember getting up at one point in time in the morning, like the third day, it rained really hard. I was worried it got blown out, and driving up to the bridge up there, like it was like an hour and a half away, and seeing if it was blown out or not, and then knowing that it wasn't, and going up there and catching them that day. So that was probably the most impactful decision that was made. But probably the second off the water would probably be doing this deal with Rapala and Crest City, having an opportunity to develop my own plastics with a reputable company and working with this company. I think that's probably the coolest thing, and like something that I've had just a lot of fun with, you know. Those are the two things.
Is a Mooch Minnow out?
It's not. It wasn't. We only had I only have like 10 packs of prototypes that are in my boat right now.
Apparently Connell, I got a couple of them.
Well, he's got like 10. I mean, there's a few. Mark's got a few packs. I mean, there's a few. You know, there's a few of them out there that are just samples that we were able to get a few made, but we only had Gizzard Shad in the first run.
Biggest mistake or one do-over in your career?
You should let me know if this was it would have been a good question. I would have thought about it.
I can't let you think about it. These have to be spur of the moment answers. Like if people already think that I already have a list of approved questions for you. So
yeah. Do-over. I think probably would be that one tournament. So after winning Bass Fest, I went and fished I fished a tournament on Kentucky Lake when the Elite Series was there. And that I'd have done a do-over. I was 23 years old. I got a lot of flack for that, fishing out there on that body of water while they were there. And, I deserved that. And so it was probably that one that I would just feel like people gave me I think that was one that I'm like, I didn't handle in the best situation, the best way. I probably would have like to have that one back.
All right, 24. Just because the stats are up there, people just always say you're number one, but I just want to read it off for the people. This is why we talked about fishing for the whole hour. And a big shout out to Jacob, because there are not many minds that work like this. And for you to take the time, like I said, I know you've got a young family. You're at the Bassmaster Classic. You came straight from Red Crest to that. We didn't even get to talk about the BPT coming up on Dale Hollow, which I think is going to be probably the most intriguing tournament. Like no BS, I will watch that tournament. Like you have people that are like, oh, I didn't even know that the BPT was going. Like I will know that BPT is going on. Like I will watch that tournament just because of the scheduling. That's a thumbs up on the scheduling for that. You talked about that the last time you were on, about the different bodies of water, taking advantage of the 80 boat field with only 40 on at the same time, going to these fisheries. Like we don't have to rehash that segment. That was an awesome segment, and we're going to one of those. You're going to one of those. We get to watch it as fans.
It's going to be the coolest dynamic, and a short little deal on that is the smallmouth versus largemouth. That's obviously going to be the coolest dynamic there. Like, how does it impact? We have a moment in time when the bass should be moving to the bank, and the majority of the bass should be heading that way. And so, like, how is that going to? I'm really excited. The only thing that I would have probably wished was there would have been like we'd had a little flood and we had a little bit more water up on like in some shallow water cover. Maybe that's the only thing that I would have scripted a little bit differently. That's it. But it should be a lot of fun.
So 24 top 10s and 35 regular season BPTs, 7 regular season wins in 5 years, 4 top 10s in Red Crest, 2 top 10s in heavy hitters, every single year in the top 5 in the Angler of the Year, with 2 Angler of the Year titles, and leading the Angler of the Year this year.
Yeah. You just can't, I don't even know.
It's easy to say number one. It's like when you actually add these together and you say that, like that's pretty damn dominant.
It's been an insane run. It has been. I mean, you can't take it for granted, but I told Welcher this. Welcher's a good friend of mine. I told him, I said, like, look, dude, there's a gear that each and every one of us have that we don't realize we can get to. Like, there's a gear inside of you and a mentality that you never knew. You learn so much about yourself. And when you come into a tournament with a different mindset, and you hear that to fish to win, but it's just it's so different. I can't even explain it. When you go and you have this utmost confidence in what you're doing and you're making minute by minute decisions on what you need to do and what's going on in that body of water, it's just something that you can't, like, of course, I mean, there'll be a time when that's not where I'm at in the sport, and it's how it always works, but it's been an unbelievable run. And I don't take that for granted. You know, you sort of, I sort of talked about this, and I said that every year you wonder if you're going to lose it. You wonder if you're going to lose that ability to make on the fly decisions. Are you ahead of the game still? Do you know you have so many young, great anglers. You have so many anglers that are understanding what's transpiring and they're adjusting to it. Are you going to still be able to fish at that level? And it's like, you have to almost get that confidence back that you had from the previous year. And to start the season off with 3 top 10s, it's, you know, they were all, you know, for the most part, my wheelhouse. And, but you just, that confidence, when you get that confidence back, it's almost like you can't make a bad decision. And you can, but it's a completely different deal, man. Like I can't explain to you when you have that confidence in your own ability and yourself and your decision-making, like, and also the mindset of like, I'm going to make a top 10 this week, like, and not even second guess that thought. It's so powerful. And I hope I never lose it. I know there'll be some point in time it will, but I'm going to keep on trying to reel as many as I can in until that happens.
Thanks for taking the time out, Jacob. I greatly appreciate it. Anything else you want to get in here before I let you go?
I appreciate it, man. I really do. I appreciate the platform that you run a great show, man. And it's always fun. It's always fun talking bass fishing with you, man.
Yeah, I'm never sure where it's going to go. Like, and I always like how Like literally, I was like, hey, we want to talk. And like, I just mentioned it on the beginning, and then there's like 9 things we didn't get to, but I'll get you back on after you win another 2. It's every 2 now. You got to win 2 to get the BTL.
Okay, well,
now.
I'm all about it, man. Maybe we'll do like a live show at dark. So I'm gonna have to have you come on the channel or something at one point in time. I'm gonna have to interview you.
Yeah. I really don't have, like, based on who you have on your channel, it's like I would have nothing to add to that. Like, no, I'd be a downgrade for the Wheeler channel.
You have a really good mindset. I always enjoy having conversations with you on BTL or on the phone, just because I feel like you have a different mindset in the industry, and that's important. Like, I think we all have different opinions of things, and then it's good to hear someone else's opinion, whether you agree with it or not. It's really cool, and it makes you continue to think outside the box. So I like to hear your opinion a lot of times. So I'm like, it just interests me. It piques my interest, and it makes me think. I
appreciate that.
Yeah. So kudos to you, Matt. Appreciate it, bro.
Go polish your trophies behind you. One of them. The third on the right looks a little dull. You might need to get the polish out for it.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right. See ya. All right. That is the one and only Jacob Wheeler. And it's very impressive when you look at his numbers, and he has good numbers from Bass too. Obviously with what he's done at Bass Fest, with what he's done winning an Elite Series. Everybody looks at history differently and how you're judged with that. That's what, ESPN has tons of shows. That's what you do when you have a show. It's entertaining to say, well, where does this guy stand and where does this guy sit? And you look at these numbers. I mean, these are crazy numbers for just the past 5 years with the Bass Pro Tour and the BPT under 4 or 5 different formats. Every fish counts, 5 bass, zeroing weights, not zeroing weights. And then you look at the instability in the industry right now, which I don't think anybody knows exactly what's going to happen. And it'll be interesting to see where these numbers go. Will he just continue to add to these things for the next 20 years? Will it be, oh, that was a different format, a different era? I don't think anybody knows where it'll go as far as like where these sit. But right now, I mean, and there is no doubt that when it comes down to it, listen, I see the damn comments, whether you like the guy, you don't like the guy. He is the best fisherman in the world. He is ranked number 1. And you can't deny it with the stats. And he's incredibly knowledgeable and willing and giving of his time to talk about that stuff. Like, I learn a tremendous amount about fishing every time we have Jacob on, which is why I tried to make a concerted effort to talk about fishing for a full hour today. So just want to remind everybody, get your St. Jude BTL t-shirts, link in the description. I think I need to fire up some music here at some point. There we go. Hour and a half show today. Thanks for everybody jumping on. Really appreciate the BTL fans, the listeners. Enjoyed today's show. Tomorrow is Thursday, which means we got Uncle Frank, and he is back with maps and diagrams and all sorts of stuff to help you catch more fish. So if you guys get an opportunity, subscribe, like the show on the BTL YouTube channel. It actually helps me. Hit that little thumbs up if you haven't had a chance, or if you watch on iTunes or any of your favorite podcast platforms, a ranking, a review, a little note about the show really means a lot. I also am working through some emails. I got a lot of emails after the Classic from guys that have sent some really great points and really great things, working on getting a bunch more guide day content in for you guys on Fridays, so you can have BTLs Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, day 4 on Friday, and day 4 on Thursday, and guide day on Friday. So we're working on it, guys. I said greatly appreciate the support, greatly appreciate the feedback, the comments section. Dude, it's a sport that we all love and will continue to love for years to come, even though it may look a little different. But hey, everything changes. So that's all we got for today. Uncle Frank tomorrow. We'll talk to everybody then. Later.